At 10:13 p.m., my phone buzzed. Transfer the mortgage tomorrow. My father always texted like compassion was a debt and repayment was overdue. Just 2 hours earlier, my mother had been smiling while she handed out dessert. Everyone received a slice, everyone except my son. He didn't earn it, she said. The room laughed. He didn't. I helped him with his coat and we walked into the chill without saying a word or looking back. That text, it wasn't a reminder. It was a challenge. And for once in my life, I was ready to fail on purpose, because they had no idea what I'd already done. To anyone outside, Thanksgiving at my family's home always looked like perfection. Gold candles glowing, crystal plates gleaming, my mother's smile polished for an audience. The Caldwells, people would say, were tradition personified. But the truth was cropped out of every framed photo on those walls. My name is Sara, the quiet one. The eldest. The daughter who learned early that in this family, affection came with a price tag. My mother, Elaine, had mastered the art of control disguised as elegance. She hosted, she charmed, and she decided every day who had earned her warmth. My father, Victor, treated our family like a balance sheet. He managed trust funds, mortgages, and emotions with the same cold arithmetic. To him, kindness wasn't free. It was an investment meant to grow with interest. Chloe, my younger sister, never had to earn anything. She was the sun we all revolved around, the golden one who always had her glass refilled before asking. And Jason, my older brother, had perfected the art of survival through silence. He hovered somewhere between them and me, a buffer no one ever thanked. After my divorce, I stopped coming around as often. I thought space might break the cycle, might make them notice our absence. It didn't. When Victor offered to help with my mortgage, folding it into the family trust, he said it would simplify things. But I knew what that meant. He wanted my house, my independence, under his control. I declined politely. Since then, every dollar I earned felt like rebellion to him. This year's Thanksgiving was supposed to be neutral ground. No tension, no strings. I told Noah, my 10-year-old, that we'd eat, smile, and leave early. He'd been so proud of the cranberry sauce he made and even wrote a little card for his grandmother. When we arrived, Elaine kissed my cheek as if greeting a stranger. She placed Noah's bowl behind her own store-bought dish, pretending not to see it. Dinner began the way it always did. Laughter about people who weren't there, compliments sharp enough to sting. Victor opened a bottle of wine, for those who appreciate quality, then poured a glass for Chloe's 12-year-old daughter because, apparently she did. When Noah asked why there were no mashed potatoes this year, Elaine's smile cut clean. "Some people don't need more starch," she said sweetly. Jason glanced at me for half a second, maybe wanting to speak but stayed quiet. I rested a hand on Noah's shoulder and whispered, "It's fine." But it wasn't. That dinner was the beginning of the unraveling. The night stretched on, heavy with forced laughter and the clink of polished silver. My mother's dining room shimmered, crystal glasses, folded napkins shaped like fans, every corner arranged for admiration. The only imperfect thing was the silence between me and my son. Noah sat across from the twins, Ava and Lily, who were busy showing Grandma the frosting flowers on their cupcakes. Elaine laughed, her bracelets chiming like applause. "Such well-mannered girls," she said loudly. The volume was deliberate. It was theater, a reminder of who belonged and who didn't. When Noah reached for the water pitcher, careful not to spill, Elaine's eyes locked on him. "Sweetheart," she said. Her voice dipped in syrup. "Let the grown-ups handle that, okay?" Her smile didn't touch her eyes. The twins giggled. Victor poured himself another glass of wine, pretending not to notice. Every few minutes, my mother found another reason to remind me I'd failed to meet her standards. A slightly crooked napkin, a quiet child, a life too self-sufficient for her comfort. It was always the same script. The same quiet cruelty wrapped in silver cutlery and polite smiles. But this time, something inside me refused to fold. When dessert came out, Noah's eyes lit up. My mother's pumpkin cheesecake was his favorite. The night before, he'd helped me bake our own small version at home, his little rehearsal for tonight. I watched the tray move around the table, piece by piece. Chloe's daughters first. Then Chloe, then Jason's youngest. Thick slices, creamy and golden, love presented as something visible, measurable. Finally, the tray returned to Elaine. She paused, knife in hand, her gaze landing on Noah. "He doesn't deserve any." "Not after his behavior tonight," she said smoothly, her voice as polished as her pearls. The room froze. Noah blinked, confused. I'm sorry, Grandma. What did I do? He asked quietly. She didn't respond. She just spooned another heap of whipped cream onto Ava's plate instead. Jason shifted uneasily. His wife stared down at her napkin. Chloe busied herself with her glass, pretending not to see. A familiar heat climbed through me. Not anger, not exactly, but something sharper. Years of enduring little humiliations, pretending not to notice. The thread between patience and submission finally snapped. Noah looked up at me and whispered, "It's okay, Mom." His voice trembled, but it didn't break. I smiled at him softly. I know, sweetheart. Then I stood. The sound of the chair scraping against the gleaming floor cut through the silence. I reached for his coat, helped him into it button by button. No one said a word. Every eye followed us. Elaine's voice broke the quiet. You're really leaving? I met her gaze, steady, unflinching. There was no hatred, no sorrow. Only calm, the kind that comes right before a storm. We already stayed too long. We walked out. Outside, the air was sharp and clean, cutting through everything that had felt heavy for years. For the first time in forever, I could breathe. The drive home passed in silence except for the steady rhythm of the wipers against the windshield. Noah sat in the back seat clutching the paper turkey he'd made at school, the one he'd planned to give his grandmother. Streetlights slipped past like fading memories. When we turned into the driveway, he asked in a small voice, "Did I do something wrong?" I turned in my seat. "No, honey. You did everything right. Sometimes people are cruel because it makes them feel powerful." He nodded slowly, his eyes distant, like he was trying to understand why the world could be unfair. Inside, I made him hot cocoa, extra marshmallows. He smiled faintly, took a sip, and went to bed without another word. When I tucked him in, he whispered, "It's okay, Mom. I don't need dessert." That broke me more than anything my parents had ever said. Downstairs, the house was still. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, small, ordinary sounds that suddenly felt sacred. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the half-eaten cheesecake we'd baked together. The one no one had touched. My phone buzzed on the counter. 10:13 p.m. A text from my father. Transfer the mortgage tomorrow. No greeting. No warmth. No, hope you got home safe. Just another order, as if I were his employee. I stared at the message, my reflection faint in the screen. It had never really been about money. It was about control. Every favor, every gift, every reminder that I owed, I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop. The glow lit the room as I scrolled through payments, bank statements, property records, every thread tying me to him. Each one disguised as help. Then I opened a blank document. Not for an explanation. Not even for a letter, a list. Every time their generosity came with strings. Every time silence cost me dignity. Every time I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. When I finally stopped typing, it was past midnight. The words sat there, heavy and final, like bricks forming a foundation. I took one last bite of our cheesecake, not for sweetness, but for strength. Then I sent one text, "Jason, we need to talk." Jason replied almost immediately, "Tomorrow morning." "I'll come by." I shut my laptop. The house was still. The night outside was crisp and clear, the kind that made the air feel new. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. He arrived the next morning before I'd even finished my coffee. His hands were shoved deep in his jacket pockets, that familiar look of quiet discomfort on his face, the one he always wore when sent as the family's peacekeeper. Mom said, "You overreacted," he began carefully. A soft laugh escaped me, not bitter, not loud, just the kind that comes when you finally run out of room to tolerate nonsense. "Overreacted?" I repeated. "She humiliated your nephew over a slice of cheesecake." Jason sighed. He explained that while refinancing his own house last year, he'd come across documents for the lake house, our parents' beloved second home, the one they flaunted as their retirement dream. 10 years ago, before my divorce, I'd co-signed part of the down payment to help them secure the property. They'd promised my name was temporary, just until the finances cleared. But no one had ever removed it. Jason looked me straight in the eye. "Technically, Sarah, you still own part of it." I blinked. You're joking, he shook his head. They're about to lease it out for the summer. 5 figures a month. They didn't tell you because they assumed you wouldn't notice. Something inside me shifted, quietly but completely. After years of being dismissed, minimized, treated like background noise, I finally had something that couldn't be erased. I don't want revenge, I said softly. I just want out. Jason met my eyes and nodded once. Then let's make it official. That afternoon, we sat across from the family's attorney, the same man who'd managed every Caldwell asset for decades. He greeted us with polite confusion, unaware that the foundation he'd helped maintain was about to crack. I told him clearly, I want my portion of the trust separated. Close every joint account tied to my father's name. Jason sat beside me, calm and steady, a quiet anchor in the storm. The lawyer hesitated, his discomfort obvious. Your parents may not approve of this. They don't get to approve, I said evenly. He nodded, typing without another word. The clicking of the keyboard sounded like a heartbeat. When we left, Jason turned to me. You know they'll come after you for this, right? I know, I said. But they'll find a locked door. 3 days later, it began. 6 missed calls from my mother. 3 from my father. 1 voicemail. Her voice was calm, too calm, like she was reciting lines she'd practiced her whole life. You're tearing this family apart, Sara. That boy of yours needs to learn his place. If you keep this up, you'll regret it. I forwarded the message to Jason. He replied with 5 words, We're done officially this time. The next morning, an email arrived from the trust administrator. Subject line, Pending Amendment Request. I stared at it, my pulse steady, not afraid, not uncertain. This was the sound of control slipping from their hands. But I also knew my parents. They were not the kind to let go quietly. January 7th, Jason's birthday. It was the one day our family ever felt remotely real. No fancy setup, no fake smiles, just greasy pizza boxes, kids darting through the living room, and laughter that actually sounded human. So when my phone buzzed that morning with a tag notification, I didn't think much of it until I saw the post. A photo of the lake house, covered in fairy lights and banners. The caption written by my mother herself. Surprise party for our amazing son. The man who holds our family together. She'd tagged everyone. Jason, his wife, his kids. Not me, not Noah. I called Jason immediately. He answered before the first ring finished. What the hell is this? I asked. They didn't tell you either? His tone was sharp, already knowing. No, he said. They just decided. We sat in silence for a moment, both aware of how familiar that sounded. Then Jason said, We're going. When we arrived, the lake house looked like something out of a catalog. Cars lined down the road, soft jazz leaking from the patio, the air thick with pretended harmony. Inside, distant relatives I barely remembered held glasses of wine, laughing too loudly. My mother stood by the fireplace, glowing under the warm light like she'd rehearsed it. The moment her eyes found us, her expression cracked. Shock, panic, and then that practiced smile. Jason? Sara. What a surprise, she said. Voice sugar-sweet but strained. Jason didn't bother with pleasantries. Why did you post that like I planned it? Her hand froze mid-gesture. It was supposed to be a nice surprise. No, he snapped, his voice slicing through the music. You used me to fix your image. Conversations faltered. Someone coughed. The clink of a glass hit the silence. My father stepped forward, jaw tightening. Lower your voice, son. Jason turned toward the room, his voice steady but loud enough to carry. For everyone here, this wasn't my idea. It's just another act. If you thought this was a family gathering, you've been misled. The air went dead still. My mother's face drained of color. We were trying to make peace, she whispered. Peace doesn't start with lies, I said quietly. She looked at me as though she didn't recognize who I'd become. You don't have to do this here. Yes, I do, Jason said. Because this is the only way you listen, when there's an audience. Murmurs rippled through the room. Someone lifted a phone. My father's face hardened, his temper barely caged. Jason exhaled slowly. Keep pretending and you'll end up celebrating alone. And with that, we turned and walked out. Behind us, the music stopped. The murmurs faded. My mother called our names, her voice cracking on the edges, but we didn't look back. Outside, the night air hit cold and clean. Jason paused by the car. You okay? Better than I've been in years, he smiled faintly. Then it's done, but it wasn't, not yet. Not until they understood what losing control really felt like. The next morning, a courier knocked at my door, an envelope in hand. Inside was a typed letter from my father's accountant, warning of serious tax complications from altering the trust. Stapled to it, a handwritten note. Don't make emotional decisions. I laughed, because I'd heard that tone before. When I was 16 and told him I wanted to pick my own college, I took a picture and sent it to Jason. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Check your email, he said. There it was, a scanned document. The amendment was finalized. Victor and Elaine Caldwell are hereby removed from future disbursements. I stared at the screen. Heartbeat calm and steady. They'll show up before sunset, Jason said. He was right. At 4:17 p.m., there was a knock, measured, not desperate. I looked through the peephole. They stood on the sidewalk, not even daring to approach the porch. Like strangers unsure if they still belonged, I opened the door but stayed inside. My mother offered a trembling smile. Can we talk about this, please? This isn't how families handle things, my father added, voice low. Family doesn't use lawyers. I met his eyes. You're right, I said evenly. Families don't use mortgages as collars either. Elaine took a hesitant step forward. We just want to make things right. We'll apologize to Noah. I waited, giving her the chance to continue, but she didn't. An apology isn't a trade, I said finally. You don't hand it over like payment. My father's jaw tightened, his expression hardening. You think you're better than us now? No, I replied calmly. I just finally see you clearly. I stepped back, hand resting on the doorframe. You're not a legacy, I said softly. You're a warning. Then I closed the door. Their outlines lingered on the porch for a few seconds before fading into the dusk. The silence that followed felt different, steady, unhurried. That night, the house was still again. Noah slept peacefully, his little breaths rising and falling in rhythm. Jason texted just before midnight, effective immediately. They're out, for good. I set the phone down and leaned against the wall, letting the quiet settle around me. I didn't feel victorious, just unburdened. Like the static that had filled the air for years had finally gone silent. 3 days passed before Jason messaged again. I was flipping pancakes for Noah when the notification buzzed. It's official. Trust split confirmed, no exclamation marks. No triumph. Just a simple fact. When I opened my email, the document was there. My shares separated, their names crossed out in clean black ink. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like breathing after years underwater. That afternoon, I picked Noah up from school. He ran toward me, backpack bouncing, cheeks pink from the cold. Can we bake cookies tonight? He asked, eyes bright. Of course, I said. The kitchen filled with the smell of sugar and vanilla, flour dusting the counters like snow. Noah shaped stars and trees, laughing when one cracked in half. I hadn't realized how long it had been since our home felt light like this, unguarded. Alive. When the first tray came out golden and warm, he handed me one. These are better than Grandma's, he said with a small grin. I almost corrected him, then didn't. He was right. They were. Later, after he'd gone to bed, I sat on the porch with a mug of tea. The air was sharp and cold, the kind that stings your lungs. Through the trees, I could see Jason's house glowing softly. We'd had dinner there the night before. Just family, the kind that chose each other. Jason, his wife, the kids, Noah, and me. No tension, no guilt, no rehearsed apologies. Just laughter and warmth. At one point, Jason had lifted his glass. To choosing peace, he said quietly. Even when it costs us blood. Everyone raised their glasses. Even Noah with his orange juice. Now sitting in the quiet dark, I thought about my parents. Everything they'd built on control and fear. All the facades they'd maintained for the sake of appearance. It had all crumbled the moment I stopped obeying. My phone buzzed once. Mom's name flashing on the screen. A missed call. No voicemail. Just silence. Her favorite weapon, suddenly powerless. I didn't call back. Instead, I looked through the kitchen window. Noah's drawings covered the fridge. Bright colors, uneven lines, life bursting from every page. This small house, once mocked for being too modest, was now the center of something real. For the first time, dessert wasn't a reward to earn. It was just dessert. The porch light flickered softly against the snow, flakes spiraling like ash through the air. From Noah's room came a faint burst of laughter, pure, untainted, safe. I took a slow sip of tea, letting the stillness fill every space their voices used to occupy. Maybe that's what freedom sounds like. Not cheers, not revenge, but quiet. The absence of their control. Later that night at 10:13 p.m., another text came in, an attempt to pull me back into their orbit. I didn't respond. They wanted submission. What they got was silence, an answer no one could twist. Boundaries don't destroy families. Control does, and if you've ever had to protect your child from your own blood, you already understand. Stay a while.